So with that, welcome back. I'm so happy you're here.
My pleasure.
The lady that I introduced as the most amazing woman in the world, the woman in the world that I know. So now you have the expectation.
Okay.
Please proceed with your presentation.
I don't know what to say following that amazing introduction, Martin. Thank you.
Is your microphone turned on?
I think that it's already been activated. Am I activated? Can you hear me? He says yes. So good. And I should be aware of that. Can you hear me on the very back row there?
Yes.
And okay. So this is our first plane trip. This is my husband, by the way, who came all the way from Nashville with me. We arrived at 6 a.m. this morning, and so we're not sure what day it is or what time it is, but we have not been on a plane since early 2020. We came back from Athens, and that's when the world imploded. And so we just haven't been on a plane since. So this was kind of an exciting experiment, an adventure for old people. You never mentioned that, Martin, that I'm incredibly old. So I'm going to give a couple of talks, and I hope that maybe during the break you can come up and ask questions or ask questions during it. It's okay with me, whatever. Yeah, I was noticing that you have a little library over here. Martin was saying he bought some books, and people are actually reading real books here. And the one on the top is Thinking Fast and Slow. So I'm going to mention Thinking Fast and Slow, but by the time I get there, how many people have read it? Okay, you read the whole thing?
Yeah.
You read the first chapter? Okay, and was it a real book? Not an audio version? You read the real book? Oh, I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. Well, you know that in the U.S. we have an election coming up. Have you heard about that? It's getting exciting. It's getting exciting. So that's a couple of months away. And along the way, I have had to learn a lot of lessons about talking to people. I thought I understood about talking to people who don't agree with me. But during this political upheaval that we've been going through in the U.S., I have learned a lot. So that's what I hope I can share with you. So there's no copyright on any of these slides, either this one or the second one. If there's anything in here that you think might be interesting, I'd be happy to send you the PowerPoint. It is yours. You can translate it into whatever language you want or use it in your organization or your team. It is free. It is absolutely free. And let's connect on LinkedIn. So, yeah. So there's one of my heroes who just passed away, Daniel Kahneman. He's the author of Thinking Fast and Slow. Probably has done more to change how we think about thinking than anyone. So I was sad when he passed away. The book is called Thinking Fast and Slow, and in it, he and really a lot of the work that Amos Tversky did, who's also no longer with us, said we're going to learn a lot by doing real experiments. They tried real scientific approaches to learn about how people think. So that's why the book is so important, because I'm guessing that all of you think for a living. You solve problems, you make decisions. And it would be good if you were using some science-backed, evidence approaches to do a better job of that. So we're not going to talk about thinking fast and slow, but just before we leave it, I want to do a little bit of review. So those of you who have read the book, you can make sure that I have it correct. Okay, Kahneman said basically your mind operates in two modes, System 1 and System 2. Now he didn't come up with those very creative names. They're part of the field of behavioral economics. So, you know, makes it easier to remember, I guess. System 1 is what we might call the unconscious. It's not really, but that's a pretty good metaphor for it. The unconscious part of your decision making, of your thinking. Whereas System 2, that's the conscious part. And the difference between the two rests on that. We've had System 1 forever, as long as there have been, well, our ancestors have been around for tens of thousands of years. We haven't really had a System 2 until fairly recently, a conscious part of our mind. It's made up of a lot of pieces, whereas System 2 is a single module. System 1 is very fast. System 2 is slow. System 1 is kind of the intuition, your gut feeling, whereas System 2, that's the rational. In fact, when you think about thinking, that's what you're talking about, System 2. System 1 can multitask, and that's a good thing because it monitors your blood pressure, your level of blood glucose. It can also decide whether you should have a certain kind of food or not for dinner and then let you know that decision. So it can do a lot of things very well. System 2 cannot. That's disappointing for a lot of us because I know you all believe you can multitask, don't you? Yeah. Come on, don't you? Yeah. But you can. Okay, System 1 remembers everything. Everything you've ever done, everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever read. The problem is it's unconscious. So not easy to access. Whereas System 2, well, you know, I'm incredibly old and I forget everything, but I know you're too busy and you're stressed out, so you don't remember things either. So that's the problem. System 2 just doesn't do a good job of remembering things. Look how fast System 1 is. Can process an enormous amount of input. Whereas System 2, not much at all. This is our gut feeling. We talk about it, our intuition. System 2, this is what we think thinking is all about. So that's a little bit of a review of what Kahneman was talking about. He said, a metaphor for this is to imagine an iceberg, that the unconscious is the part below water, the inaccessible part, the part you don't see if you're sailing, whereas System 2, that's the part that's above the water. Now, the interesting thing about Kahneman's work is that once it got started, lots of other people began building on it, and they say, this is a pretty good metaphor, except now what we learned about System 2 is it's not the part above the water. I don't know if you can see it, but no, it's not going to work. There's a little tiny snowball right there. Do you see it? That's System 2. And the rest is all System 1. And in fact, there are some behavioral scientists who say, we don't even know why we have it. System 2. And yet that's what we use and feel like that is thinking. That conscious process of making a decision, making a list, making some sort of a decision tree. That's nothing compared to everything that's in the power of System 1. I don't know how you feel about that. I think it's a little disturbing in a way. That's Kahneman's model. Okay. Here are two books that I know you haven't read, probably. The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, and then maybe the switch by okay, good. You have to say Chip Heath and Dan Heath. You can't say Chip and Dan Heath. So it's the Heath brothers, and the model came from Jonathan Haidt, and they adopted it. So a lot of people have read Switch. They made it popular, but the idea really came from Jonathan Haidt. So they say the mind is not exactly like a System 1 or a System 2. It's like an elephant with a rider. So can you see the match between the two models? That the rider, the little tiny rider, that's the rational mind, that's System 2. And the big, giant, enormous, powerful elephant, that's System 1. And then this model has one more thing that I think is important, and that's the path. The elephant is going somewhere, and it is on a path of some sort, and that does have impact. The environment, the context, all have something to do with the way we think. So the analogy is, the elephant, it's big, it's powerful, it's like System 1. It's also the emotional part of our thinking, but it's the one that actually gets things done. It provides the energy. What Jonathan Haidt said, you can't change people's minds by talking to the writer. You've got to talk to their elephants. So I have classes that I give on thinking, and in one workshop, it was in Taiwan actually, somebody said, well, how do you do that? How do you talk to the elephant? And that's really the basis for this talk, is how do you talk to the elephant? That big, enormous, powerful part of how other people think and how they make decisions. So the rider, that's the little tiny rational part, that's System 2. The rider likes facts and logic and is directing the elephant, sort of. And well, the problem is the rider believes that he's in control, but it's really the elephant that makes all the decisions. So these are just models. They're abstractions. That means they've taken reality and they've created something that's much, much simpler. So they're not totally true. They don't totally reflect reality. I think each one of them has something to offer. I like what George Box said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So for me, I use Kahneman's model if I'm trying to solve a problem myself. If you haven't read the book, or if you didn't get the same thing I did out of the book, then if you just go to YouTube and say, Linda Rising, Thinking Fast and Slow, there's it must be a dozen or so videos of how do you solve problems based on what Kahneman said about System 1 and System 2, and we won't have time to talk about that, but that's useful for me. But Haidt's model of the elephant is useful if I want to talk to somebody like my neighbor who has been flying a Trump 2024 sign outside his house. I'm not a Trump supporter. How do you talk to somebody like that? Now, it's very easy if you're on one side or another of that situation to say, well, those people are wrong. He's nodding. Do you see that?
I'm not agreeing with you.
No, those people are stupid. There must be something wrong with them. How in the world could they support somebody like Donald Trump? My neighbor is not a stupid person. He's not malintentioned. He's a nice guy. He just supports Donald Trump and a whole host of other issues where I don't agree at all. How do you have a conversation with somebody like that? So for me, Haidt's model, where I imagine as I'm talking to my neighbor that there's a little tiny rider, that's the rational piece, and there's a big, giant, emotional, maybe terrified elephant. And I'm going to make any sort of contact, I have to talk to the elephant. Do you have anything like that in your life? Someone where you think, I tried talking to that person, but they just won't listen. Or I've tried convincing that person that they should do X and they don't listen to my reasons.
Anyone with kids.
I thought maybe you'd say married, anyone who was married or had a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Yeah. Those other people, when they see the world differently, it's very hard to have a conversation or convince them. If you want to convince them of something, it's very difficult. So maybe this will help you if you adopt this model. Imagine as you're talking to the other person, you're not talking to the rider. Remember, the rider is logical. That's system 2. The rider does want to hear all that good data and information, but the decision basically is going to be made by the elephant, and the elephant is not rational. The elephant is big and powerful and has a whole host of other motivations. So I use both models. I think they're both good, and they're both, as George Bach said, they're both useful. We're going to use some patterns along the way. You might know I've written a couple of books about patterns. I'm going to reference those patterns in red and in italics. By the way, there is an app out if you're interested. So let's talk about the first one. It's called personal touch. In the pattern personal touch, we recommend that you try to understand the other point of view. Now, if we're talking about a rider and an elephant, that means you've got to understand what the rider is thinking. How is the rider thinking? What is the elephant feeling? The elephant is based on emotion. So what's the elephant feeling? What's the rider thinking? And then remember, there's the path. What is the path like for this particular elephant? Jonathan Haidt says, first and foremost, usually we think about ourselves. In fact, it's impossible to do this. It's impossible for you to know what someone else is thinking or feeling. You can make some assumptions, some good guesses, but others' approaches are closed to you. In fact, there are so many good examples of that now that Kahneman's work is sort of available to all of us, that there are plenty of instances where we can show clearly that these people don't see the same thing at all. That have you seen, for instance, the meme that sort of overtook the internet at one time several years ago? I can't remember exactly when. It was called The Dress. Did you see it? Yeah. Not the rest of you? Not. Yeah. So can you tell us what it was?
The dress with 2 different colors.
Yes.
Depending on, I don't remember why it was
blue.
There
It
was
was gold.
there was the right way and the wrong way. And in fact, the person who sent the original picture of the dress didn't know that it was going to be so contentious. Sent a picture of the dress to, I think maybe a family. And they said, oh, we don't like this blue dress. And the person who sent said, it's not blue, it's white. No. It's blue. No, it's white. It's blue. No, it's white. So is it coming back to you now? Did you see it? Okay. Different people see that dress differently. They really do. They're not making it up or trying to be argumentative. They really see the dress as a different color. Some see it as white, some see it as blue. Lots of theories now about why that is the case, but still, you could put the picture, I'm not sure it would work on a PowerPoint slide, but nonetheless, you can pull the picture up and people will say, no, it is blue, no, it is white. You're never going to convince somebody who sees it differently that they are wrong. Because it's not a right or wrong, it's just a difference. And why it happens, nobody knows. Nobody knows. So usually we just think of our own point of view, and we're not very good at this part. What is that other person thinking? What is that other person feeling? And what is it like for them? What do they face every day? So the first thing we have to do is sort of get the writer out of the way. The writer likes facts. The writer likes data. The writer likes information. So it's not that you can't have that available, but direct it to the writer and say, here's the information about this particular subject, fine, and to emphasize the positive. Because typically the writer is a skeptic and is a negative thinker. So Chip and Dan Heath called this bright spots. Look where things are working well. If I'm trying to convince you to do something, where is it that we're seeing success? So the idea is to keep the writer occupied. Give the writer something to think about. But this is not going to convince the elephant. This is only for the writer. It's unfortunate that I know everybody in this room is very smart and you believe. That sounds like religion, doesn't it? You believe in facts. You believe in data. You believe in evidence. You believe in science. And we think if someone doesn't agree with us, it's because they don't have enough information. If we just fill in the blanks, if we just tell them what they're missing, then they will come around and they will see things the way we do. Have you tried that? How's that work? What's wrong with those people? Isn't that what you think? What's wrong with those people? I explained this to them very clearly. I showed them the evidence. They should have been paying attention. What is wrong? And now we have really serious contention. So this is a cognitive bias called naive realism. That if we all just had the same data, then we would all agree. We would all come to the same conclusions. When really we know that truth, whatever that is, facts, yeah, we all think we want to know that, but we filter everything through our system 1 and system 2, and we don't really pay attention to the facts that don't agree with us. We do such a good job of that. We give inordinate attention to things where the facts and data support our point of view, and then we totally ignore any facts or data on the other side. And we all do that. We all do that. So in my example, I say, if you were to tell me, and you had evidence for it, that Donald Trump was the most intelligent, I can't even say it. Was the most intelligent, caring, thoughtful, kind person on the planet, I would not believe you. So that's not about Donald Trump. That's about me. And we all do that. we choose the data that we let in. And that's called confirmation bias. So if you do a search for cognitive bias, you're going to come up with a huge list of problems that we have in thinking. And we're going to rank them. And what's the worst, the absolute worst bias? That's it. Once we believe something, once I have certain feelings about Donald Trump, there is no way. You're never going to convince me. You can haul out all the data you want, and I will find a way to tap dance around it and ignore everything I want to. And that's not just me, that's everybody. That is our worst cognitive bias, confirmation bias. Okay, well, what can we do now to talk to the elephant? We've got the writer is busy, we've given the writer some facts and data, and we've pointed out some bright spots, so what can we do? First of all, the elephant is probably afraid. In fact, in some cases, I think we could say the elephant is probably terrified. So we want to be very careful not to upset the elephant. I have that in the back of my mind when I'm talking to my neighbor down the street. I don't want to upset my neighbor. I don't want to get into a big discussion about what has Donald Trump done today. I want to have in mind this terrified, huge, enormous, emotional, irrational beast, and do what I can to say, it's okay. Things are all right. Don't scare the elephant. And the most convincing thing that you can do with a terrified elephant is tell it a story. A story that illustrates your point. A story about other elephants who are just like you. And the story should have a happy ending. It should have a moral. It should have a message. Instead of facts and data, tell a story. So there are some really interesting stories of putting people in an fMRI machine and watching what happens to their brains when you argue, present facts and data or information. The brains of those hearers who are listening to all that data, they begin to find a way around it. They find a way to disagree with you. They want to start poking holes in that list of facts and data. Now, if we watch what happens to the brains of people when you tell them a story, those people are with you. They want to know what happens. Did the handsome prince run off with the beautiful princess? And did they all live happily ever after? They don't poke holes in it. They stay with you. And in fact, what you can see in an fMRI machine is the brains begin to look alike. They begin to think alike. Whereas when you present an argument based on facts and data, the brains begin to look like they're in contention. So a good story with a happy ending, and elephants love peanuts. So the pattern is called do food. So if you can do it, say, well, let's go have a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever. Let's go share some food while we talk about this contentious thing and tell stories. It was at one time the way we knew who our friends were. Those who shared food with us. In fact, the word in French is compagnon, someone with whom I break bread. And even today, when you came in, you began sharing food with, we feel better. We like that. We're more open. So many experiments have shown the most convincing thing you can do with a group of people is to feed them. And then they'll listen. So if you want to talk to a group of elephants, bring in some nice peanuts and tell a good story. Emotional connection. So the pattern Fearless is from Fearless Change. And it says, don't be afraid. Just listen to the elephant. I like what Chip and Dan Heath said, be a trampoline. Let them bounce ideas off you instead of arguing with them. No, this is wrong. No, you don't understand that. No, you said something about this. No, that's not true. Is just say, oh, I'm not sure I understood that. Did you mean this? Ask questions. Show that you really are listening. You're really listening to what this poor elephant who has his own story, what does he have to say? This takes time and effort. We know that trust, which is what you're doing, building trust, takes a lot of time and effort. Okay? And it's not a once and done. You have to go back. You have to do it over and over again. Stay in touch is the pattern. There was a wonderful experiment done with car washes. If you went in for your car wash, they gave you a little card and it had 10 spaces for punches on it. If you get all 10 spaces punched, then you get a free car wash. So they ran an experiment with 2 versions of the card. One version had a card with 10 punches. Another version had 12 punches, but 2 of them were already punched. Now, just to show you how rational people are, there shouldn't be any difference, should there? I mean, it's 10 punches over here, and it's 10 punches over here. The same, right? I wouldn't be up here telling you this story. There was a significant difference. Many more people who were given the card with 12 punches and 2 of them already punched, they're the ones who finished that card. Why is that? They thought they already had something going. We've already started on this. I've already got 2 punches. Only 10 more to go. I'm almost there. So yeah, I better go back and get my car washed 10 more times. I don't think we've ever had our car. Have we ever had our car washed?
Yes.
Have we?
Couple of times.
So the car wash experiment shows that. If you can just say to the elephant, you've already started. You've already put your foot on the path. Things are already happening for you. You're already moving in that direction. That the elephant will keep on going. Elephants like that. They feel like, I'm on the right path. This is the way to go. This is what I want to do. I've already started. If you've got a team and you want to introduce a new programming language or a new tool or a new approach or whatever, tell them it's really a lot like the old one. You already understand the user interface. You already understand half the commands are exactly the same. You're already there. Talk to the elephant who's terrified of anything new. And make sure that you do it in little steps. The pattern is called baby steps, and the evidence around change is so clear that we do a much better job with little tiny, almost minuscule sometimes. I have a friend who wanted to start exercising who just couldn't do it. Tried to go to the gym and work out. No, that didn't work. But what he did was say, well, you know, I'm going to just walk around the block. He could do that. That was about all he could do, but he did that. And then after a while, I saw him, and he was walking around 2 times around the block, and then 3 times, and then 4. We like it when we don't have to think about some enormous task that lies ahead of us. If we can break it up like the long drive to grandma's. We don't want to think about, oh no, that's 8.5 hours away. Well, but we're going to stop and have coffee on the way. Okay, I can think about that. So when we were coming yesterday on 2 different flights from Nashville, the first flight was delayed almost 2 hours. And my first thought was, oh no, we're not going to make the connection. I wonder, and you go, wait, no. Just one step at a time. Let's see when that plane actually takes off. Let's see when it actually lands. Then we can think about, are we going to make that connection? And we obviously did. We did. We're here. So every now and then, yeah. Organizations don't like that. I don't know how many times talking to a high-level executive wanted to make a plan for a long-term change. We're going to be agile by June. Nonsense. You don't know. Nobody knows. What we can say is, well, we're going to have this first small step and then the next small step. Because typically organizations, they don't like to think about how you're going to get there. They want to make a plan and then they make it happen. What happens along the way? We're not very good at thinking about that. So, and this ties into another talk that I don't have time to give, but if you're going to do that, realize along the way that step in the middle rests on a belief that you have about whether or not people can change. That if you believe that people have some talent or ability or mindset and that's it, then you have what's called the fixed mindset. If you believe, no, there is possibility for growth, that we can all learn, we can all change, we can all get better, that's called the growth mindset. If the growth mindset motivates your interactions with all the elephants in your life, you'll have a lot better success in moving them in the direction that you want to go. There's a wonderful paper by a professor at Harvard Business School. It says everything looks like a failure in the middle. So not only can you have the slides, ask me for that paper and I'll be happy to send it to you. Benjamin Franklin said, the best way to get someone on your side is to ask them for something. So the pattern in fearless change is called ask for help. It could be anything. Ask them to do something for you. Ask them to loan you something, which is what Benjamin Franklin did. Ask them to help you. It's the most powerful influence strategy we have. Get them to feel like a part of whatever it is. I need your help. I can't do this unless you help me. So ask for help is paired with another very powerful pattern is don't forget to say thanks. We are remiss about that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me. And then finally, the most powerful pattern in fearless change, I think, is called whisper in the general's ear. I don't know how many times I've talked to agile coaches. Oh, do we have agile coaches in the room? Good, okay. I don't know how many times I've heard agile coaches say, let's get all the managers, let's get them all in a room, and we'll just explain. So talking to their writers, let's explain what this is all about, and that we'll only have to do it once. So my advice, never. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Never. That's like don't do it. Never talk to high-ranking elephants, okay, in groups. Always one-on-one. For so many reasons. One, in a high-ranking group of elephants, no elephant is ever going to raise his trunk and say, I'm not sure I understand. And let's go back to that second step. Do you mean this? No. That would show to the other elephants in the room that they didn't understand something that they obviously did understand. So they're never going to admit that. So they will never tell you the truth about what they think. So what are you going to do instead? You're going to make yourself available to say to high-ranking elephant X, oh, I know you have some questions about this. I'll be happy to come in anytime. And the high-ranking elephant is going to give you a series of tests. The first test is, you just said you would come in at any time. All right, let's do it at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. And your response is?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you, Alan. Yes, your response is, I will be there. I will be there at 6 a.m. on Monday, or I'll be there at 6 p.m. on Friday. Yes. You passed the first part of the test. Here comes the next part. You come in for the meeting, and now all of a sudden the high-ranking elephant says, you know, I don't understand this, and I have questions about that. Can you explain that to me? And it's now on you to come up with an explanation that the elephant will understand. No jargon. Remember, you're thinking in terms of what is reality like for the elephant. If you can do that, you pass. The last question on the test. When you leave that meeting, if you walk out the door and never say anything, never share what went on in that meeting, that was the third question on the test. Now the elephant trusts you and will call you back and will ask you other questions. So what we don't really understand, I think, is that high-ranking elephants live their lives in terror. They have to make important decisions about the entire organization with little understanding of what's going on. And they have no place to go. Nobody they trust. No one they can ask for help. So if you provide that, that gives you an important in any organization. This high-ranking elephant trusts you, realizes that you will come in at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. We'll try to explain things so that that high-ranking elephant can understand. And we'll never share any information about that to anyone else. It's confidence. I found this quote once in a Cutter publication, I won't read it to you, that it backed this pattern up. It said, yeah, executives don't like big meetings. Yeah, sometimes they have to have them, but they want to do one-on-one where they get to call the shots and say what goes on. And in order to get that, they are willing to give you a few minutes and see how you do. And then maybe more if they begin to trust you. So I thought, aha, Cutter said it, must be okay. So last but not least, the path. There was a very famous experiment done with popcorn. I saw the pizza coming in, so it reminded me of food. They gave people coming into a movie theater a bucket of, I think it was 2 weeks old, the 2-week-old popcorn. Some of the buckets were really big, like a gallon size. Some were smaller, quart, maybe pint. Would that make a difference? I mean, the popcorn was terrible. 2 weeks old. Would anybody eat any of it? Would I be standing here telling you about this? Yeah, the people who got the big buckets ate an enormous amount. The people who got the little buckets, well, not so much. So our decision about how much popcorn to eat or how much pizza to eat has nothing to do with whether or not the popcorn and the pizza taste good at all. It's how much is there of it. It's a message to us that, I should eat a lot of it, or I shouldn't eat very much of it. So an experiment that Google did had to do with M&Ms, which is my favorite, peanut M&Ms only, of course. They collect enormous amounts of data on everything in their organization, and they could see that the BMI, that's the ratio of weight to, it's a measure of health, was not going in the right direction for Google employees. And I don't know if you've ever been in Google, but they have amazing kitchens, just like you've got here, and lots of food all day. What happens to us when we're surrounded by food? And all we have to do is just go to the kitchen and get it. We eat it, and we eat more of it than we should. So they decided to try an experiment. They took all the peanut M&Ms and they put them in an opaque container so you couldn't see, and they put it on the very top shelf in the back of the kitchen. Now, they didn't remove it. They didn't say, look, you people are getting too fat. I want you to stop eating so many M&Ms. No, they did not. They just put it in an opaque container and put it on the very top shelf. And what happened? And this was just in New York. In 7 weeks, 2,000 people in that office consumed 3.1 million fewer calories from M&Ms. Now, maybe they were eating other things. We don't know that. But their consumption of M&Ms definitely went down. So if that's a problem for you, and I'm looking around the room, most of you, Scandinavia I think of as pretty slim part of the world, unlike Nashville, Tennessee, which is not a slim part of the world, that your elephant might need to be nudged. That if M&M, don't buy them, first of all, but if you do buy them, put them in an opaque container and put them on the very top shelf in the very back of your kitchen so that you're not as easily faced with a decision because you don't do a good job of making that decision. How many M&Ms should I eat? You don't do a good job of that. There's plenty of evidence for that. So this also works on your own elephant. And then finally, we're herd elephants. Elephants are also herd elephants. We do what everybody else is doing. So if you can show your elephant that, well, everybody else is doing this, the other departments decide to try that, we're all going to adopt whatever it is, we're more likely to follow in that direction. So I started with politics, and I'm going to end with politics. That my husband and I are members of an organization called Braver Angels. And the mission of this organization is to get reds and blues, that's what we call the political parties in the US, get them to talk to one another. And when we joined, I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm a facilitator. I know how to talk to people. I know how to influence people. I teach classes on influence. I know about change. I've written 2 books about change. This is nothing, really. If you're trying to talk to somebody about agile development or some business practice or a new programming language or a software tool, that's one thing. If you're talking about gun control and abortion and gay marriage, that's very different.
Not here.
Very different. I was totally unprepared for how difficult that was going to be. So I would say we've learned a lot. And that's a good thing, because in our country now, nobody talks to anybody. If you know that your neighbor is voting for Trump, you don't talk to them. If you know that they're supporting Kamala Harris, you don't talk to them. So we've got to do a better job of talking to those people, the people on the other side. And what helped me a lot getting going was thinking about their elephants. So I hope maybe that will help you good luck. Thanks for your attention. Thanks to your riders and your elephants. So, my friend Alan Yepsen came today all the way from
Oh,
that other country over there, those other people. He has a new book that's just out. It's called Impactful Organizations, and it looks really interesting. I know because I've read it 3 or 4 times already. And anyway, if you'd like to come over and meet Alan and talk to him about his new book, I'm sure he would love to hear from you. And I think we're going to have pizza. Is that right?
Yeah, first I just have to say one thing, and it's don't go to YouTube to look for the Thinking Fast and Slow. Just go to the Beauty and Code website,
Oh, okay.
and you will find the video from Beauty and Code 2019 where you gave that talk. So
Okay, so how to solve problems using System 1 and System 2. Good, thank you.
with that said,
Okay,
pizza.
pizza. All right, so we're going to talk about trees and agility and me. So I think I started the last talk by saying something about how old I was. So
You didn't say what your age is.
no, I didn't, but I'm going to do that now. So you might be wondering.
How many tree rings do you have?
How many tree rings? It's incredibly old, so I'm 82. Oh, did you think I was older? 82. And I'm still working, and I often get asked, well, what's your secret? How do you keep on going? And I don't know. So, there you go. I don't know, but
Wait a minute,
I think-
can I say, I think I know why you keep on going.
oh, okay. Yeah.
Because you like researching things and finding out about stuff and putting
Yeah,
them together
of
into
course.
some
Yeah.
cohesive
absolutely.
idea. And then
Yeah,
you want to
but
just share
That doesn't
it.
fit with the talk, Carl.
Sorry.
You just ruined the talk.
No, it just doesn't fit.
Yes. No, the talk is, yeah, I think it has to do with exercise. So I've always been a believer in exercise. I always exercise. And to me, that meant going to the gym and finding the latest and greatest machines, like the one where you climb the mountain, you go up the stairs, and it just never ends. And whatever it is, I love all those machines. I love going. And we live in a retirement community.
Mindy, you're in the wrong mode. You got your another slide showing there.
I didn't do any modes. He said that would go away after a while. Is that right?
Did you press F5 on the
Did I?
keyboard?
Let's try that.
There's speaker mode or whatever, and there you go.
Ah, how's that? Good. All right. Thank you. All right. So this is the clubhouse exercise room in our community. And before COVID, we'd go every day. We'd work out on the machines. This is part of it. The other part is over here, all the weight machines. And then there's a Olympic-sized pool in here. And it's usually pretty busy. I think we also have Fox News on the TV displays.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so that's what I did, and I enjoyed it, and I thought this is a good thing to do. And then COVID hit, and the clubhouse closed. And all of the gyms in our neighborhood closed, because people were not willing to go in and be out of breath next to other people who were also out of breath. And who knows, there was no vaccine early on, if you remember, back in the day. And so what are we going to do? Can't exercise. Well, fortunately, in our neighborhood, we have miles and miles and miles of hiking trails. And I said, okay, well, we can't go exercise in the gym. This is kind of a second choice. Let's go walk. Let's go hiking in the woods. And this is Middle Tennessee. We have all kinds of interesting things there, including winter. So yes, we even went in cold weather. We don't get a lot of snow, but yeah, we get some snow. Those are our hats that we bought when we went to Moscow, where they have serious winter. So we do the winter. And lots of animals. I don't know, can you see that? Okay, we have lots of deer. In fact, too many, actually. Too many deer. And, bunnies. I don't know if you can see her. Can you see her? That's a fox. It's a female, a vixen. She had a litter of, 3 little kits that were in our neighbor's yard. And they would come out and play and romp around. So foxes, and that's an owl and a hawk, and trees. And I realized as we're walking around and doing this every day, we tried to walk 4 miles every day, that I don't really know a lot about trees. So as Carl said, this does fit. I like to go research and learn about new things, especially strange things, and see if I can make a connection.
And give a weird talk.
And give a weird talk about it. There you go. So and I have this is the weird talk, and I've given it many times. So trees. So I don't know anything about trees, so I have to do a little research. So the first thing I learned was you see, and in fact we do here, we see the trees above the ground. But this is a little like System 1, System 2. There's also a lot that goes on underground. Now, of course, there are roots. All plants that grow in any kind of soil have roots that grow down into the soil. But there's also a fungus that lives in the soil that is attached to the roots. So what you see here is a seedling and the roots, and then there's this kind of very web-like, very fine fungus that's attached to the roots. And that fungus is also attached to all of the other plants, all of the other trees that are in the neighborhood. And that connection is called mycorrhizal. So the mycorrhizal fungi, if we were going to dig underneath all of the trees out here or any of the trees in our neighborhood, you'd see the roots of the trees, and then attached to the roots would be these little fine thread-like fungi. So I read a paper that was published in 1997 that said these fungi that are attached to the roots are connected to all of the other trees and plants in the neighborhood. And what you've got there is it was Nature magazine called it a wood wide web. All the plants, and that would include all the trees, are connected by this fungi that's attached to their roots and also attached to the roots of all the neighboring plants. So what you've got underground, if we could see it, is a lot of connections between all the plants. And then at the same time, there was a book that came out in 2021 written by an amazing woman who I immediately bonded with because she has a PhD in forestry. Forestry is a very masculine discipline. There are hardly any women in it. And every step of the way, she had to fight for all of the results that she uncovered. And she found some amazing things that foresters previously had not suspected. And when she presented those at academic conferences, she was ridiculed. And they picked on her simply because she was a woman. And I think, I've been there. I have a PhD in computer science. I know what that's like. So I enjoyed reading the book. It's still very popular. Suzanne has at least 2 TED Talks, maybe 3. There's one for children, where she talks about her research and what she discovered that she wrote about in this book called Finding the Mother Tree. So I recommend it highly. So what this fungus does is connect all of the trees in the forest, or any other plants that happen to be growing there. And it's enormous. It's very dense. There are miles and miles and miles and miles of fungus that you walk on and never see. We have no idea that it's down there. So let's see what happens. So we know that plants, all green plants, take carbon dioxide from the air. They remove the carbon and they release the oxygen, and they use that carbon to make some kind of sugar or some kind of carbohydrate. And that's the food that feeds the plant. Now, the problem is there are things that the plants don't have any way of, well, accessing, and that would include all the minerals. So the phosphorus, the calcium, the magnesium, those are things that are in the ground. They have no way of getting a hold of them. However, the fungus does. So the fungus can access the minerals. And since the fungus is attached to the roots of the trees, it can send those minerals to the trees. And in exchange, it wants the carbon to make its own sugar that it has no access to, because being underground, there's no photosynthesis that happens down here. So they share. And what Suzanne Simard was able to show with radioactive carbon dating was how this stuff moves around. And what she found was amazing, that they talk to each other. A tree that's in need of, say, magnesium will say to the fungus, hey, I really need some magnesium. And the fungus will say, okay, I'm sending you some magnesium. And by the way, I need a little more carbon. Could you send me some more carbon? So it's not just one way, fixed amounts all the time. They respond to each other. Now, yes, you could probably take this too far and say, yeah, I don't think they're really having conversations. But yeah, they are. They really are. And in those conversations is survival. That the trees get the minerals they need, the fungus gets the carbon that it needs, and the trees can talk to each other. So if a tree is in trouble, or maybe it's a young tree that's just getting started, it can ask for help. And the surrounding trees will send it whatever it needs to say, oh, this tree looks like it needs a little more carbon. Let's send it. Or maybe some magnesium. So fungus, can you send it some magnesium and I'll pay for that with some extra carbon. They work it out. Isn't that amazing? I thought it was amazing. So I thought, this is really impressive. All of this is going on. I never knew about it, that they are helping each other. And then in the other research, I thought, well, is it possible that there's something else going on here that we don't see that helps us? The answer is yes. So this was an experiment that was done in Denmark. Still good though, I think. So in a hospital, they took patients who were all undergoing a common surgical procedure. I think it was gallbladder removal back in the day before they did laparoscopic kinds of things. And randomly they assigned patients who had had this surgery to either one of two conditions. So in one condition, the hospital room where they went for recovery looked out on a brick wall. The other group could see trees. Now, they weren't outside. They could just like you can, they could just see trees around them. So these people can only see a brick wall. These people see at least one window where there are trees as they recover. So the results, the researchers thought there would be results, but the results were beyond significant. They saw that those who were looking at trees didn't need as much either for pain or anxiety. They also left the hospital sooner, didn't take as long to recover. They had a better time of it. They didn't have as many minor complaints. So the results are amazing, and I can send you this paper also if you want, but the research expected results of some sort. That's why they set up the experiment, and didn't expect it to be as significant as it was. Now, I think most hospitals do what they can to try to ensure that patients of any kind have a view of nature. Maybe they see a little bit anyway. Nobody stares at a brick wall. And when I saw that, when I read the paper, I thought, well, this is for people who had surgery. These are people who are sick, they're recovering. What about healthy people? Would there be an impact of trees for the rest of us? So the next study I saw had to do with an unfortunate development. This is in the city of Chicago, where there's a lot of low-income housing. So there were enormous high-rise buildings built for people that are on low incomes. Now, in the beginning, all of the various complexes had maybe not a lot of trees, but some. So maybe just a little park area near a parking lot. But over time, many of these complexes paved over the green space, and now there are no trees. So it's kind of what you could call a natural experiment. They didn't have to divide people up. They were already divided up. The populations were similar. You got some people who have a little bit of green space, a tree, and people who have nothing. So it's not exactly like a brick wall, but pretty close. So yeah. So the results were clear. This had an impact across the board on the people who lived in those buildings. Whether or not they developed, I'm going to call it a culture or a community of cooperation and support, whether they trusted one another. And then they looked at Chicago police crime records and saw that there was a significant difference between levels of petty crime, levels of major crime in the two different settings, with the tree or without the tree. So yeah, even for healthy people. So what the psychologists say is this is called attention restoration therapy. That we are, for some reason, still living with the heritage of our ancestors who lived their lives outside. And when we don't have that, there's something missing. And we might call it stress or overwork or too busy, when really it is that we haven't been out with the trees. When they had that exposure to nature, that it takes a toll, that a lot of us, especially during COVID, when we didn't go outside, we stayed inside all the time, that added to our level of stress. So when you look at the benefits, you see enormous increases in creativity, improved attention, decrease in stress levels, heart rate, blood pressure. That being around trees has a measurable impact on how we live our lives. And sometimes we're not paying attention to it. We think it's nice. I walked into this office and I could see all the trees and I knew what this talk was going to be about. And most people do that. Look at out the window. Isn't that nice? It's a nice thing to be able to see all the trees. It's not nice. It's essential. You're better when you work in an environment like this. You're more creative, you're more innovative, you're more productive when you're in an environment like this. And as we saw with the study in Chicago, it's safer. We feel safer in an environment like that. So I heard a podcast interview with this woman, Frances Quove. She's at the University of Illinois. And I thought what she said was interesting because I think it reflects what most people feel. She said, I thought it was going to be okay. This was her assigned topic. She didn't pick it. So she's doing research on whether trees help or not. And she said, well, trees are nice. Who doesn't like trees? We all like to have trees, look out windows at trees. What she didn't know is that trees are an important part of a supportive, humane environment. Without it, people are very different. She also said that now she makes a point of walking to work every day, and as she walks through the trees, and she makes sure that she stops and looks, pays attention to the trees. So whenever I look at research, I always wonder, did the behavior or the life of that researcher change because of the research? And that's when I really pay attention. So it was looking at what she has done. It changed her. Her attitude now toward trees is very different from what it was when she started. Well, what if you live in a city like Copenhagen or Stockholm? And, well, you might have a little park, and there are a few trees there, but it's not like a forest. It's not like 4 miles through the woods. This is just a little park bench and, you know, maybe a couple of babies or some dogs, and it's very nice. It's very nice. But well, is there any benefit to that? And it has been measured. So all you have to do is just go once a week, spend a little time in the park. 7% fewer cases of depression, 9% fewer cases of high blood pressure, reduced stress, anxiety, heart, and children like it. That's got to be important. So we know that your memory improves. We talked about memory in the last talk. 20%, even when it's cold. And in this particular study, they had a control group walk around a city where there were no trees, and they did not see any benefit. So it's not being outside. It's being outside with natural trees, shrubs. Yeah. And of course, those of us who are in this software domain know that there were a lot of people who spent time walking around. Steve Jobs is famous for saying, hey, let's go for a walk. And he would always head for a park near Palo Alto, had lots of interesting discussions. We know Jeff Bezos spent time in Central Park, wondering what should he do with this business he was thinking about starting. LinkedIn's CEO also spent time in Mountain View, California. So they may not have known the research, but they did know that it helped them to be outside with the trees. So we know science often, especially psychology, talks about individual psychology. And I think what the trees are trying to tell us is that this is a system, and that somehow we are part of that system, and that when we separate ourselves from the trees, things don't go as well for us. We have totally upset the system we have evolved to be a part of. So we know that science has done a lot. It's given us all kinds of devices, and some of those distract us, but not one of them can give us the kind of benefit that you get from going outside and being with the trees. So here's another study that was done in London. So they know in various neighborhoods in London, people go to the local pharmacy. And they also know in each one of those local neighborhoods whether there are trees or not. So they can look at the separate neighborhoods, they can look at how many drugs are the people in that particular neighborhood taking, and they can see a correlation that those who have green space are taking less medication for anxiety or depression, that they don't need it. They can just go outside and enjoy the trees. So there's something about it that when you feel better and your neighbors feel better, the context, the environment, the path is better. Somehow we're all in this together. So what Suzanne showed was, it's not just, say, a couple of neighboring trees. She actually mapped a forest, and what she saw was there are connections between all of the trees, and some of the trees have a lot of connections. So the darker the color, the more connections. So these really, really dark ovals, those are trees that are connected to almost all the other trees in the forest. And as it turns out, those dark ovals are the old trees. The trees that have been there since the forest began. That means these old trees are able to reach out and help, since they communicate, help the younger ones, help the ones that are sick, somehow communicate with each other. And she called those mother trees. In fact, that's the name of her book, Finding the Mother Tree. So those mother trees have the most connections. You could call them father trees, I suppose, but they pay particular attention to the young ones. They're especially connected to the seedlings that might be in the shade. They're not able to make as much carbon, so they pay particular attention to them, give them special attention. Now, when the foresters come in, they cut down everything. So what Suzanne is trying to implement in the forestry industry now is to say, okay, I know you have to cut down the trees, this is your business, but couldn't you leave some of the old trees? Couldn't you leave those that have, I guess, wisdom, knowledge? Let them help the new seedlings that you're going to plant. She has not been successful, by the way. So when I saw that, I thought, you know, walking is good, I thought, but I hadn't realized all the other benefits. And after doing the research, my biggest learning was that I was an exercise snob. I thought, if you're not going to the gym and you're not using fancy equipment, well then you're really not exercising. Sorry, walking is nice, but it doesn't really count. So I have already told you how old I am, and what I haven't told you is that I'm very healthy, and I actually have only one health issue, and that is osteoporosis. So that's the thinning of your bones that happens as you get older. So my internist watched every 2 years, measured bone density. She said, Linda, your bone density is getting worse. We're going to have to start taking drugs. So I fought it for several years, and finally I gave up and said, okay, we'll start these drugs. And then COVID hit. I wasn't able to go to the gym. I thought, oh no, I can't go work out. I can't lift weights. What am I going to do? My bones are probably going to fall apart. The next time I went in to have my bone density measured, my internist said, this is very strange. Your bone density is increasing. Now, the drug doesn't do that. The drug keeps your bones from deteriorating, but you don't build new bone. She said, what are you doing differently? Well, I said, I'm not exercising anymore. She said, you're not exercising? I said, no, we're not. We're just walking. Like, that doesn't count. Maybe it's the trees. Maybe the trees, being out there with I I don't know. The other thing I got from all this research is that's me. I am an old tree. And it's my job to help Alan with his book and Martin with his conferences, and yeah, that's my, I feel like I have a definition for my role. I'm a mother tree. And then my husband and I realized that in the time of COVID, we have seen a lot of people in our community die. In fact, we've seen people in our community die anyway. And that sooner or later, that's going to happen to us. So we found a Nature Conservancy sponsored green burial in Larkspur Conservation, and we went out to visit it. So if you're going to be buried at Larkspur Conservation, you cannot be embalmed. There is no coffin, there's no lead, no wood, it's all natural. And then when you're put in the ground, they will plant a tree. So I want to be a tree. Maybe a red maple, I don't know, what do you think? Could be good, could be good.
Actually, they let you get buried in a meadow if you'd rather
If you're honest.
if you'd rather be grasses.
I could be grasses, I suppose. So that's what happened to me. What are you gonna do? So based on what I have told you, you should try to go outside every day and not just walk around the streets of Malmö or where. You should be with the trees every day. The research is pretty clear. It only takes 5 minutes. Just step outside. I know the smokers have an advantage here because they step outside and they're with the trees all the time. So yeah. It's also possible Steve Jobs instituted something called a walking meeting. As long as you don't have too many people, he said, well, let's go for a walk and we'll have the meeting outside. So 2 or 3 of you could just go for a walk and be out there with the trees and make your decision or do whatever else you're doing with your meeting, but go outside. If you can't go outside, have something inside, like a real plant. Real plants are better, it's been measured. Real plants are better than pictures. Yeah, it's okay. Pictures are okay, but not as good as real plants. So they even did experiments with videos and slides trying to make it as realistic as possible. It doesn't work as well. So if this place is amazing. It's not only got this wonderful view of the trees, but it's got, wait, are these real? I'm acting like
Yes, they're real.
They're real. Okay, so they really are real. If you can't do anything else, just go to the window and just spend a moment or two looking out. The evidence is pretty clear that will also help. So I started giving this talk kind of right in the early COVID period, and I got this email. It said, I've worked from home since COVID. I have 2 windows in my home office. I sat with the blinds of both windows closed for 2 years. But that changed after I listened to you. Now my first course of action is to open the blinds when I come in and I look at my backyard, trees, and green throughout the day. I even occasionally get a visit from some deer. Thank you. So I asked her to send me a picture. So here's what she had. So she lived with that for 2 years. Now, it seems so obvious, doesn't it? Why don't you open your blinds? Why don't you see, perhaps, that there might be wonderful things out there that you are missing that might help you be so much better, that might really change your life. Just simply opening the blinds. Many times that's all it takes. We talked about baby steps. Sometimes it's just a tiny, tiny step. So here's what it looks like now for her. And you see there's a deer. She passed up that view for 2 years just because she thought it doesn't matter. It's not important. Having the blinds closed or open, it's just one less thing I have to think about. And maybe the sun was shining on her laptop, I don't know. She never considered the impact of what she was looking at over the course of the day. So this is part of our evolutionary heritage, that we do better when we have a chance to enjoy that. So if you want to keep up with Suzanne Simard, hers is called the Mother Tree Project. I think it's so much bigger than trees. This has to do with connection, that we are all connected, even if we can't see it. That it's not just people, it's the trees. The trees are a part of us, that we all depend on each other, that we're all better when we take advantage of that cooperation. So I'm going to stop and let you go home and walk around the trees. So, thanks for listening.
Just one